All right, now that CIA torture report, it certainly has lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, not just ticked off and taking sides, but very passionately believing that this is a debate about what is in America's best interest. Take a listen for yourself.
This particular release, in my judgment, serves no purpose whatsoever other than to endanger Americans around the world.
I know from personal experience that the abuse of prisoners will produce more bad than good intelligence. Our enemies act without conscience. We must not.
What are we supposed to do? Kiss him on both cheeks and say, please, please, tell us what you know? Of course not. We did exactly what needed to be done in order to catch those who were guilty on 9/11 and to prevent a further attack, and we were successful on both parts. I think it's a terrible piece of work, basically. It seems to me it's deeply flawed.
The interrogations of CIA detainees were absolutely brutal, far worse than the CIA represented them to policymakers and others.
The CIA is lying. The president needs to purge his administration of high-level officials who are instrumental to the development and running of this program. He needs to force a cultural change at the CIA.
Well, as of now, it certainly doesn't look like the president will follow Senator Udall's advice and show the door to Mr. Brennan, and for that matter, anyone looking for prosecutions as it relates to this. It also won't happen, at least certainly domestically. DOJ says they've got no appetite for it. But what I'd like to get into isn't so much, guys, the morality or even the efficacy of it, because you read the report here, it seems pretty clear from the report here we got no actual intelligence to prevent an attack here or saved American lives. You've heard some disagreement with that, at least from within intelligence circles, but I have a broader, bigger problem. And Richard, you're a student in history. We have learned before, educate people on a certain thing called the Church Committee, all right, from the late Senator Frank Church, where when you give the CIA unchecked power and basically say, do what you think is right to protect America, it never is neat and convenient and ends where we believe the line ought to be.
The Church Commission was convened in the early 70s to look at a series of abuses that went back to Bay of Pigs. But there were two kinds of abuses. There are abuses whereby there's a systematic ignoring of the rules and people violate the standards. Then there are the abuses where the standards themselves are lousy. And that's what the debate today is about.
Well, what we found out, going back to the question which you conveniently ignored, was in the Church Commission, we spied on fellow Americans. We spied on people who were legally protesting. Basically, when you have, as you referenced, an open-ended policy, and that's what happened after 9/11, people fill in the gaps differently than maybe you or I would. And as a consequence, we turn back and say, wait a minute, I didn't sign up for this. Rectal feeding,
I didn't mean
freezing guys to death.
I didn't mean to bypass that. What I was saying was that the Church Commission was about bad policies, not just rogue operatives. In the debate now, the Feinstein, McCain, the president are trying to make the case that the problem was bad policies. The defenders of the CIA will admit only rogue individuals. So little guys go down. Big guys get away with what's going on. That's the issue here. I find the tactics abhorrent. I don't think they should be used on a moral basis. But let's put that aside. The real issue before the country is, does it work? McCain says it doesn't. The Senate report says it doesn't. Even Brennan doesn't say it does. He talks about a general causation.
And by the way, members within the CIA and the FBI, if you remember, they objected at the time to saying, what are we doing? And I'm going to give you a list of things, and you tell me what bothers you the most. We're supposed to have checks and balances. Anyone who does Civics 101 know how we work here, that we don't have a monarchy here. We don't have basically some ruler who decides unilaterally what we do. We're supposed to have a judicial, legislative, and executive branch here, and we're supposed to at least agree where we want to go. That didn't happen here. There wasn't oversight. Also, Congress was either lied to or misled about this. People debate who knew what and who what whatever, but even the vice president, if you go back to some of the words that were used, they made it clear that we don't torture. What bothers you the most, the absence of oversight or the people decided they decide where the law goes and who needs to know about it?
You know, you're like asking me to make a horrible choice among horrible options here. I guess I would go with the lying in all of this, because the one aspect of oversight that we establish for our clandestine services is Congress. They have oversight authority, and they're the only ones who are supposed to be able to keep the CIA in check in spots like this. There's a general consensus. I think a lot of people would say, we don't want everything that the CIA or the FBI or the NSA is doing to become public, because that kind of defeats the purpose of having an intelligence agency. So you need to have honest dealings with the regulators, in this case, members of Congress. I have no doubt from everything that I've read that members of the CIA, leadership of the CIA, lied to members of Congress. We know they spied on members of Congress when they were working on this report to find out what they were working on. So I think that's the part that bothers me the most, because it makes it impossible to keep tabs on what they're doing, and that's the only people who are supposed to be able to do it.
Dominic, my friend, you and I have had debated this before here, because you sometimes say, hey, you know what, after 9/11, all bets are off. You got to do what you got to do.
All bets were off, and that's the sentiment.
But here is my strongest argument to people like yourself, and I know so many others who feel the way you do. Explain to me exactly how, when we decided we had to find out about these guys, we didn't go to our own guys. We hired two shrinks who had never interrogated before, who didn't speak Arabic, who didn't even, had never been involved in any kind of training, didn't know anything about Al-Qaeda. We paid them $81 million for an outsourced federal contract and hired some ding-dongs that couldn't even cut in the military, and they're making up interrogations as they're going along, like they're watching bad Marquis de Sade films here, and they figured out what they're going to do. My point is only, how exactly, if you said all bets are off, we don't even have management for this? We're giving it to Looney Tune third parties that didn't learn anything except harmed American interests in the process. Are you comfortable, if you're willing to go there, that you're at least turning it over to the real professionals, because it sure as hell didn't seem that way when you read the report?
Do you want the honest answer?
Well, you really want some ding-dongs running the thing.
The honest answer is Congress didn't want to know.
Oh,
I mean, come on.
that's not true.
Come on. I mean, let's be real. Are we really that naive to admit that we didn't know these things were going on? Are we really that naive? Of course they were going on. After 9/11,
feeding?
No,
I would really bet. Excuse me. You're coming at me. I can't hear what.
We've known about waterboarding.
One at a time.
One end to the other.
One at a
We've known
time.
about waterboarding for some time, but some of the stuff that was in this report, you knew?
I'll take you this far. There's more stuff that we don't know. But I will tell you this. I really believe that Vice President Cheney should perhaps retire or just, become more laid back. I didn't realize this until I traveled the world. You have no idea how much America is hated in certain parts of the world.
Okay, hold on, Tom. Look at the guy on the screen right now.
Right.
This is the same rocket scientist who decided that we'd go in on flawed information. Let's remember what this genius told us. That we would forget that we'd be greeted as liberators, but we'd fight all this uranium. We'd fight all these weapons of mass destruction. We needed to take our eye off Afghanistan. We had to go into Iraq.
He sure did.
Didn't happen, right?
Right.
And did we plan right for the war? Heck no, we didn't do that. He didn't do anything right, and nothing turned out the way he said it did. And this guy, who said when it came to his time to serve in the military, he had better things to do, and I quote, you're going to turn it over, Dominic Carter, to this guy to decide, to the CIA to do black ops programs and go wherever they want to go.
I didn't
well, that's
say,
what happened.
Even Dominic isn't defending.
Let me just finish.
Cheney. Even
I
Dominic.
didn't say that I turned it over to him. He happened to be one of the most powerful vice presidents ever, and he had a lot of leeway on what went on. But gentlemen, if you pretending that you, or maybe you actually that you didn't know these things.
Well, time out. We do know from the reports, and we do know from the intercepts.
This is the CIA.
Time out.
Do you think they were sitting down going, after 9/11, now tell me what exactly
Dominic,
you guys are doing?
if they had no problem with it, explain me this. Why did they say, we can't let Powell know he'll blow his stack?
That's true.
The president of the
Because we
United
know
States went
politically-
public saying we don't torture people years later when they actually were. I'm telling you, I believe that this was not gone up the food chain like it was supposed to.
I don't mean to sound like this is a conspiracy, but being in journalism, you know that we question a lot of what comes out of our elected officials' mouths. I know you don't believe everything that you hear the President of the United States say, no matter who the President is.
Dominic, I don't believe for a second especially when you go into who actually commissioned and who managed these interrogations, that anybody in their right mind of authority would feel comfortable that it got delegated to the level it did.
You don't think Cheney knew?
If he wanted to
bet my
find
life
stuff out,
Cheney
he
knew about
wouldn't
it.
have farmed it down to these folks, okay? Because they made their own reports after they were done where they judged their own performances. What business in America would let your own person judge their own effectiveness to get their own bonuses? This thing was so mismanaged. I'm telling you, that's what happens when we do these things on the sly. That's what happens when you write a check and you won't want to know what happens with it. If you don't have oversight to these things, it doesn't work, and people become cowboys, and they do it the wrong way. And we as Americans, all of us, pay a price.
This is not a defense of Dick Cheney, but you don't know what he knew, and you can't, come on, guys, we're all grown-ups. That's nonsense. You can be skeptical, but cynicism doesn't get you any further down the road than blind optimism.
Cheney is all but admitting it in the comments that we just played.
In that case, take him at face value.
Okay.
The problem here is much simpler, and I think for the purposes of the American public, we ought to pose it that way. If you engage in these behaviors, how do you object when another nation treats our soldiers the same way? You don't get good intelligence. You get bad intelligence because people being tortured will tell you whatever you want to hear. And you heard that not from one person or another. Third of all, it erodes our moral standing, and there's a practical value to having moral standing. If you put those things out there, it is neither a defense nor an indictment to say everybody knew. The fact of it is that this report, as limited as it is a step in the right direction. The CIA is chastised. For a while, it won't do the same stuff. And here's a kicker. There's another report. Leon Panetta, when he was head of the CIA, commissioned his own report of this. And the rumor is, it said no actionable intelligence. The next step in this process is going to be for people to try to get their hands on the Panetta report.
And it doesn't look right now that he at least, or they at least, will willingly make that available, but we shall see. All right, please at home, head over to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on today's question. Detainee torture, was it in America's best interest? You've heard different opinions at the table. We want to hear yours. Make your opinion heard. Okay, when we come back, Dominic sat down one-on-one with Ed Mullins, president of the Sergeants Benevolent Association, questioning why Mayor de Blasio has Reverend Al Sharpton as an advisor.
He's no Dr. King. So when you look and you look at the value that Mayor de Blasio places on this, I question why.
Dominic's interview and more right after this.